And we're off. See, Cindy, this is what happens when you go on a movie set. Like we just start going into take 1, take 2, take 3. Like I think
Yeah,
we're on take 7 right now.
probably at this point, but that's okay because it's all a matter of how it ends up at the end. By the way, did you see who I'm repping today? Did I tell you? You thought this was for Cindy, right? No, it is not. It is for number 19, my man.
Well,
Because you know, if I'm not,
I know that's your man. So
he is my man. He's the man I would love to have. No, when I'm not repping my good buddy Darren McCarty, I'm repping the captain because he's all that.
Well, if Steve Eisner was watching this and he's seen our like little failure at the start, hopefully this isn't a sign of what the rubbing season is going to be, because what a mess it was at the beginning. But we're back.
All right.
So where do we start off? That's the question. Where do we start off?
Where do we start off? We can start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning of the beginning, right? So we're talking about the fact that a lot of these young guys who people expected to see maybe have a chance at a roster spot actually find themselves in Grand Rapids. Now, I actually think that's a good thing. So we're talking about guys like Soderblom, Edvinsson. I think some people thought Edvinsson was going to, up for a roster spot. You've got, Marco Kasper. Now, we knew that he wasn't going to have a roster spot. People were excited to see him at camp. I don't know if they thought he was going to be a Connor Bedard, but I mean, not yet, right? And even if he were, I think Steve would keep him, quite frankly, in the minors to develop, right? I think they're going to burn Connor Bedard out up there in Chicago, but that's another story for another topic. But so all of these young, exciting prospects who people thought they were going to see a couple of them on the roster, they're not. They're in Grand Rapids. But I think that's part of Stevie's plan. I think that's brilliant on his part. And he's got all of these veterans that he's got in this roster. And I think that's what makes it exciting. And you showed those stats earlier, and that says a lot about what these guys bring to the table.
Yeah, it's funny because we talk about it all the time. Like we talked about it earlier before we were rudely cut off by the stupid StreamYard. That was pretty rude of them.
It's a coordinated effort.
But
yeah,
like, we talked about how the goal differential that they have the team is a lot different than the differential that they had before. I think it's like plus 49.
Yeah. And that's really going to make all the difference.
I don't know what's going on right now. Yeah, so this is the players this is the players in and the players out. So players in they scored 96 goals last year. The players out scored 47 goals last year. So you add those guys in there with the goal differential, that it's a goal difference of plus 49, and a goal differential compared to 2022, that'd be a plus 10. That easily puts you in the playoffs. If you look at the whole like landscape of the playoffs, when all these teams made the playoffs, the reason that they made the playoffs was because they had a good goal differential. Usually you don't make the playoffs with a negative goal differential. I don't think it's ever happened. I'd have to go check the stats, but I don't think you could ever go back and say, "Oh yeah, this back like 10 years ago, this team won the Stanley Cup with a negative goal differential." I just don't think it happens, because you usually need a good goaltender to win games, and you need to have a good goal differential.
Well, the other thing that you need is you need to not be going into overtime. We talked about that last season, about how important it was to win in regulation, because that is a huge factor as well. And you can't keep playing all those additional minutes, especially when we're deeper this year. So that's good, right? So we could probably tolerate that better than we did last season. But it's not a good sign when you're going 15, 14, 15, anything north of 10 games going into overtime. You don't want to do that. So if you look back and see when the Red Wings were routinely winning more than 40 games, what you also saw was those were exchanged. They had very limited low numbers when it talks about going into overtime. So that's the other thing that has to happen. And I think with these veterans that they brought on, first off, these guys are used to making the playoffs, and they're used to playing on teams that win in regulation. So hopefully they're going to bring that element as well to the Red Wings this season.
Yeah, I think that when you add a guy like Alex DeBrincat, that's obviously a guy that you needed to add into your team, with the with the goals that he could score on the power play. Daniel Sprong, a guy that you can add on that could also help the power play out. Shane Gottsberg, another person that can help the power play out. So that's a good thing for them. I don't know what the hell is going on with this internet.
Well, that's the other thing is special teams. They knew that they had to improve in net, they had to improve on special teams, and they had to stop going into overtime. So I believe that they've accomplished a couple of those things. Now, if they can just keep from going into overtime, I think this is going to prove to be very beneficial to them getting into the playoffs. So you mentioned Shane Gostisbehere. He, I think, is probably one of the most underrated players that were acquired. People want to talk about Confer, Sprong, or something like that. I think Sprong's probably going to be your most surprising player because Sprong has an absolutely phenomenal shot. I mean,
Yeah, he does.
It's amazing. Yeah, he's got a tremendous shot. So I think that's what's going to kind of surprise some people. And then the other thing that I really like in terms of the direction that this team is going is look at that fourth line they're putting together. It seems like they are actually trying to put together, and I hate to say it because I don't think they can really be replaced, and that is the grind line. They're trying to put together another grind line with that fourth line. And so that means that they're planning on a more physical game, and it's about time. I don't think that those young guys that they sent down to Grand Rapids, they're talented. No doubt that they're talented, but I wouldn't say there's not much physicality there. You know what I mean? And I think that the Red Wings really seem to want to stack their roster with some more physical presence.
Yeah, and if you look at it, the line pair is from Max Boltman. This is probably in practice. It had DeBrincat, Larkin, Perron, Fabry, Comfort, Raymond, Rasmussen, Kopp, and Sprong on the third line, which I really like that third line. I don't know about you, but I really like that third line. And that fourth line with Kostin, Veleno, and Fisher, that's an interesting line because obviously we know Christian Fischer can play the center position. He could also play the wing. I like the way the Red Wings have kind of stacked that together. JT Compher is a guy who can play the wing as well as play center, and so can Andrew Kopp. And Rasmussen, he could play center a little bit, but I think he's a better wing than he is a center.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And one of the things, speaking of wings, is lots of wings, right? One of the things that we talked about last season was really maximizing the potential of Dylan Larkin. And how do you do that? I really don't think you've been able to see everything that Dylan Larkin can do because he hasn't really had a reliable winger. And now I think with the line that they put together for him, that he's got that now. So I think, and what I expect to see is I do expect to see a lot more production out of Dylan Larkin. I think he's going to be the top goal scorer, to be honest with you. I know that Alex DeBrincat
I think Dylan Larkin's going to get...
But who's your top goal scorer? I say it's going to be Larkin.
I could see your point about Larkin being well, we have your picks right here. So these are Cindy's picks. Why is it not going on?
Oh gosh, there
so you have Larkin as. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Why is it going so slow for me? Well, you have Larkin up at the top. You have DeBrincat as mine's not showing up right now. Oh, there we go. Team MVP, DeBrincat and Seider. You have the highest goal scorer, Larkin. You have the most underrated player, Gostisbehere. Surprising player is Husso. The record's 40, 34, and 8 in the playoffs is yes. For me, it was a little bit different. I have Dylan Larkin as the team MVP. I have highest goal scorer is DeBrincat. Most underrated player is Compher. Surprising player, I think, is going to be Alex Lyon. I think he's really going to hold down that net and help this team out. And the best goalie is obviously going to be Husso because I really don't think he has anybody else that could really back him up, can take that role. I think it's going to be a game better, 41-33-9, but they're going to lose more games in overtime. And then I do think they're going to make the playoffs as well. So it's interesting because we both have different opinions on it's funny when you sent me that, I was like, wow, she's really close to mine. And I was like, man, I don't understand how you got so close to mine, but I did like that Seider pick of the team MVP. I do like that a lot. I think that Seider is going to have a really good campaign. And we talk about the Red Wings and how they started last year. I mean, I think in between November and December, they had such a rough time winning games, and Seider and Raymond were kind of playing not good. So if they could play better in November and December, that could be huge.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because that's kind of where things fell apart for the Red Wings, right in that period of time. That seems to be where they slump. And I'm not sure why that happens, but it's happened like the last 2 or 3 seasons. If you see kind of where they struggle, it seems to be right in that holiday period, end of November, beginning of beginning of the year, that November, December period. So I'm really hoping that, again, these veterans that they brought on are able to help them navigate that better than they have. And I think that they will. And I really believe that the long-term game that Steve is playing here, and the reason why he has sent all of kind of his young prospects, his young hopefuls down to Grand Rapids, I think it's twofold. Number one, he wants to reinvent the Griffins, because the Griffins had a god-awful season, and they were not happy at all. And they basically did a wholesale change down there. Lots of changes that they're making there. And I think they want to see the Griffins do better. And I think there's a number of reasons why that is. So he took some of his NHL experienced guys and some of his young talent and put them there for that reason. But also because obviously he had to make room for all these veterans. Now the question is, why is he signing all these veterans, right? And I believe his reason is that he wants these guys to get them to the playoffs so that his young Stanley Cup champions in waiting can be brought up to get playoff experience. And I think that's kind of the long game. Yeah. I don't think he expects to be a contender this year, or quite frankly, even next year. I think he's really, and I've said this before, I think he's looking more toward the, 20, 25, 26, 27 type season. I don't think he's looking for this year or even next year. It's going to be the year after that. But he needs to get his young core some experience in the postseason, because they haven't had that yet, and they're not going to. And quite frankly, you got guys like Raymond and Seider and some of these Evason and Soderblom and some of these other kind of young hopefuls that have contract extensions coming up. If they don't think they're going to be on a playoff contender in short order, they may not re-sign, and Stevie needs to re-sign those guys.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point about Raymond and Seider, how their contracts are coming up. And I don't know if you saw the Rasmus Dahlin contract extension. It scares the shit out of me, especially when you talk about Seider getting the money like that Dahlin got. Now, Rasmus Dahlin's probably a better offensive player. I still think Seider is going to grow into a better offensive player, but $11 million a year. I mean, that's a lot of freaking money. And the NHL salary cap is probably the stupidest salary cap in all sports, because it never moves up. It's like Biden. It's like Biden economics. Nothing ever changes. It's all dumb. And I think that's something that the NHL really needs to get going, because if you look at some of these opening night rosters, have 21 players, 22 players. They're not full, because they can't fill these rosters, because the salary cap is really hurt some teams. And I think that if you're the Red Wings, like what Yzerman is trying to do right now, if we're being totally honest with each other, I think he's trying to stagger these contracts so that he's not paying them all at one time. That's my opinion, because I think the way that he looks at it, and I think every general manager who has to deal with a salary cap looks at it, like, if I can stagger this guy at 3 years, and then I pay him money, like a big time contract, like 6-7 million, and then I stagger the next guy to come in line where he can be staggered in there, I think that could be good for the Red Wings. But you just got to keep staggering these contracts, because right now it's you're going to have to pay these guys like Raymond, Seider. And like you said, if you don't start winning soon, they're going to say, well, I can go somewhere else.
Sure. And they're going to have plenty of suitors too. You know what I mean? So it's not like they're stuck here by any stretch. So you've really got to be aware of that. And I think that the problem that we may encounter with guys that are getting these huge contracts, and then other guys like our guys like Seider looking for that, is that they're only paying Dylan Larkin something south of that.
It's not even much in comparison to some of these players.
So
some of these players Yeah,
Yeah,
some of these players are making such an absorbent amount. Like if you look at Austin Matthews, right? We all know
right.
that Austin Matthews is a hell of a freaking hockey player. But the reality of the situation, is he worth $13 million a year? Probably not.
Well,
Can you have
is it
can you have
sustainable for the organization? You know what I mean?
what I think that's what the Maple Leafs are running into right now, if we're gonna
Yeah.
be totally honest with like the Maple Leafs are a cautionary tale because they have Austin Matthews, they have Mitch Marner, they have William Nylander, they have John Tavares,
Hmm.
but they can never get those guys at the back end or the goalie position right. And that's partly because they can't afford those guys. Number one, number two, they have so many guys in the forward group that are paid such an exorbitant amount of money that they can't really spread it throughout the team.
Yep.
And like you hear about it all the time in football. A lot of people talk about it in football how you really don't want to spend too much on like a running back or like a wide receiver. Like you
Hmm.
don't want to allocate all your budget to that because you have to buy other spare parts. You can't just draft it all. I mean, then in a realistic world, you have to go out there in free agency and spend a little bit of money. You're not going to be able to draft a complete team. It's not going to happen. You're always gonna. You never know how the progression of some of these young guys can go. It can go really fast or it can go really slow. So
Right.
you're gonna have to add some free agents in there. But what the Maple Leafs are doing, that's a cautionary tale for every young team in the NHL right now. Because if you can't pay guys that are on your back end, like your defenseman or your goalie, you're not going to be you're not going to win a Stanley Cup. Like that's just my opinion.
Right, right. So they've got themselves in a little bit of a spot there. I think what's going to happen is if you do see guys with a higher AAV, what you're going to find is that they've got shorter contracts.
Yeah,
They're not going to have, yeah,
that's usually what they try to do. So they try to spread it out throughout. So they try to spread the contract out, maybe minus a mil and then minus a year, or add a mil minus a year. I mean, it's kind of a good way to go about it. But the reality of the situation is, if you do that, like on the people love their DeBrincat contract because it's only 4 years, right?
right.
So he's gonna get paid in another 4 years. But like contracts like Justin Hall or Ben Sherratt, those are signings. Those are contracts that could really rue the day because you paid a little bit more. You paid little bit less upfront, but you added a year onto it. So it's a very interesting concept from some of these general managers, and I really don't think that they have the answer to it. To be honest, I don't think any general manager in the NHL has an answer to it right now.
And I think that the Red Wings are going to have to come up with that answer because it's coming up on them very, very quickly. Because some of these guys, like they're in these contract years. In fact, Dylan Larkin said in a recent article that he likes the dynamics of this group because you've got guys that are on kind of on the bubble on their contract year. You've got other guys that are used to making the playoffs. You know, you've got some guys that have got something to prove, some guys that are trying to get the highest dollar amount for their upcoming contracts. So, you know, people sometimes don't want to talk about the contract element, but that is really huge in terms of what you see in their performance also. And then, you know, the guys that are going to be here for a few years that have already signed these longer term contracts, you know, they're kind of coming to, they're coming into the sunset of their careers and they want to go out champions, right? So they all have a motivation. And I think that's the other thing that this team has been lacking for the last several seasons is when you look at the composition of the team, they had either nothing to lose, guys who had nothing to lose, they were like on their way out anyway, or you had guys who were so brand new and so young that they figured they had time, you know, and then you had guys who were in the middle of contracts and so, you know, that they felt they kind of had that kind of, it's sort of like me in between elections, right? Your first year, like the election year is your big year. And then the year of your last year of your term, right? Right before reelection is, but those 2 years in between, you can kind of breathe a little bit where you don't have that sense of urgency. So, but now those dynamics have shifted and you've got your core kind of solidified, but yet they know where they're headed to. So I think I can agree with Dylan Larkin that the dynamics have shifted in a way that is going to motivate production. And I believe that's what you're going to see. And I think they've all bought in to the vision that Steve has, which I will say it again, is going to be like that 25, 26 or 26, 27 season.
I could see that track. Like I could see that track that they're going towards. And I think that you're right. I think that that could be the year that they kind of get into that Stanley Cup contention. The issue with this team with the Red Wings right now is the East is so tough. Like the East is a very, very big juggernaut. Now, if the Red
Yeah.
Wings were in the West during a conference, it might be a different situation because they're not dealing with, Tampa Bay. They're not dealing with Toronto. They're not dealing with the rising Ottawa, Buffalo. Florida was in the Stanley Cup Finals, and they barely made the playoffs last year. I mean, that just tells you how stacked the East is, especially like you've seen Pittsburgh go get Erik Karlsson. You've seen, Carolina's going to be good. New Jersey's going to be good. And the Rangers are going to be good. Like there's a lot of teams in the East that are going to be really, really good. So if you could just be competitive, I'll take that as a win for the season, to be honest. If you can be competitive and go for a playoff spot and make it, that's a win. Now, if you barely miss, okay, that's fine. I don't really want to miss the playoffs, but I want to see improvement. I want to see the lone coaching staff really make a mark on this team. And when you do bring in the young kids, they know what to expect from the people before.
So I understanding that, and I agree with you. Okay, I agree with you. We're in a tough conference. I wish we were in the Western Conference. Forever they wanted to be in the East. Now they're in the East and they're screwed. Right?
But it seems like every conference the Red Wings are in, no matter throughout my life, like the Western Conference was tough when I was a kid. Now the Western Conference blows, and like the lowest team, like the Red Wings could have been in the playoffs last year in the Western Conference, or just about there.
Yeah, they just missed it, and even in the East.
Yeah, so in the East they barely missed it, but in the West they probably could have made it because Nashville made it. So, right. I mean, that's just what we're talking about. But what were you saying about the whole my standpoint?
So, I think that the East is tough, but I think I think last year was a weird year. I really do. That whole Boston Bruins run, I mean, that had a whole nother flavor to it that I don't think you're going to have this year. I think this year the East is going to be more winnable. Actually, it's going to be. There's no doubt there's tough teams in there. And I'm going to ask you who you think the biggest juggernaut, the biggest problem is going to be for the Red Wings. I think we're going to have teams that are different, but you're not going to have that weird Boston Bruin thing going on. So I think there's going to be a little more opportunity for the Wings this season than there was, and they've got a better team. So I think that those two things put us in a much better position. But I'm going to ask you, who do you think, and I don't necessarily mean that this is the team that is going to end up at the
winning the cup.
Conference champions, but who do you think is going to cause the biggest problem for the Detroit Red Wings this season coming up?
Well, they play them Thursday. I think the hardest team you're gonna play all season long, in my opinion, they're gonna be a pain in the ass for everyone that they play. It's the New Jersey Devils. I think the New Jersey Devils are probably one of the most positioned teams for the future. I think that they're so good, especially with Jack Hughes. You got Timo Meier, you got Jesper Bratt. Like they got some great players in New Jersey. They got good goaltending. I like them in the Metro. In the Atlantic, I mean, Tampa's going to be tough. Toronto's going to be tough. But I really don't respect Toronto's goaltending situation or their defense, to be honest. And with Vasilevsky out for the first couple of weeks, months, potentially, that opens the door for the Red Wings, in my opinion. This brings up this stat that I really wanted to get your opinion on. This is the interesting bet on FanDuel right now. So the team to record the most points in October 2023. This is dead heat, so you have to pick the right winner. The Red Wings are 6 in this betting odds. 6. So do they think the Red Wings are going to get off to a hot start? I mean, plus 1,700 is a lot, but you could make some money on that. But that was an interesting bet that I looked at, and I was like, what do they know that we don't? Like, because they're not putting those odds out there for nothing. Like the Red Wings have to have some kind of feeling about the Red Wings. And the point total right now, if you were to look at the betting odds, their point total is 86.5. That would not have got you in the playoffs last year. To win the East is 3,800 plus 3,800. To win the division plus 2,000, which you kind of expect. To make the playoffs, if you want to put some money on it, me and you put some money on it, it's plus 200. We can make some money on it, but to win the cup, it's plus 7,000. So they're pretty far away from being a cup contender because of the betting odds. You look at the betting odds, plus 7,000. I mean, you're basically throwing money at the win. You could throw $5 at it and say if they win, they win because it's your team. But if you were an outsider, you wouldn't be like, oh yeah, let me put that bet down.
So here's why I think those stats look the way that they do. Why do I think they've got the Red Wings doing well in October? I think it's because right now through camp and through the preseason, we look good as far as health is concerned. We look healthy. There's nobody who's got anything scheduled. We've got some pretty reliable bodies right now.
Yeah.
Whereas the other our competition not so much. Like you said, Vasilevsky's off for a couple of the first part of the season. You've got a couple of other guys who are questionable for the beginning of the season. So I think that we can take advantage of that window of opportunity, and I think that that's what that reflects, the fact that we're healthy and others are not right now, even going into the beginning of the season. Not to mention the fact that that's paired with this whole new look of the Red Wings, all these guys from other teams that have been, proven producers, and now they're all going out there with something to kind of establish themselves as Red Wings, right? So I think it's a combination of those two things. They're going to want to establish their identity right off the bat. And I think they're going to do that. They need to do that in October. They're going to do that for sure right off the bat here. So in October.
Yeah, if you look at it, the players in, like we went through before, the players in 96 goals. So the players you added have scored 96 goals last year. The players out scored 47, so you really didn't miss. You're not going to be really missing much because the goal differential is plus 49. And then if you would have applied that goal difference to the goal differential in 2022, it would have been plus 10. So we talked about the goal differential. We talked about some of the things that were going on with the Red Wings. The one thing I look at is, like, I think that people kind of gloss over this when they talk about the Red Wings. They say, okay, the Red Wings could be good if, and then there's a lot of national media people that say, no, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to finish, second to last in the the Atlantic Division.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that's true. Like, I think that a lot of people are glossing over the fact of the matter that the Detroit Red Wings did get better in the offseason. And I think that if their power play can go up now, we can go last year. The goals last year, they scored 240. They were 24th in the league. They got 279 scored on them, so they're 23rd in the league. You're not going to win many games like that. But if that power play can get up to like the top 14, top 12, and the penalty kill can get up to like the top 15. I mean, you're potentially talking about a team that could be in the playoffs just because of the improvement that they made. Because if you're going to get an extra goal in a game with the power play, or you're going to save a goal on the penalty kill, I mean, last year we talked about it ad nauseum between me and you that, like, the penalty kill wasn't great. They would always find themselves in the penalty kill, and they would always kill themselves on the penalty kill. And then the power play, they can never get a good look at the net, and they can never score when they needed it to do. Now, the Brinket's going to help you. Sprong is going to help you out on the power play. Gostisbehere is going to help you out in the power play.
Yep.
And it's not just going to be a one thing. And they can mix it up. They can put different lines out there that can kind of confuse the defense. So I like that. But I just like the guys that they added that, like, Gostisbehere. Like, that's going to help you out on the defensive end. I think Jake Walman's going to have a better year in terms of goals when he's playing a whole year and not coming back off injury. And I think if Seider doesn't have a sophomore slump like he had last year, I think you're potentially talking about a guy who could potentially be a huge difference maker for this Red Wings team.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're going to see a tremendous amount from Mo Seider. He's going to look a lot like he did in his rookie season when he won Rookie of the Year. You're going to see that Mo Seider. I think he's gotten over that sophomore slump. He definitely has more confidence now than he had before. I saw that in training camp, and I think you've seen it in preseason also. Just the confidence factor. And I think that this Red Wings team is going to go north of 90 points. I really do.
Well, if you go north of 90 points, I think that will get you in the playoffs because, like we said earlier about Boston, like, I don't think they're going to be the same world beater that they were last year.
I mean,
they lose a guy like Patrice Bergeron, potentially like their Stevie Yzerman. You just kind of, you really don't. I know they got Pastrnak and Brad Marchand and Charlie McAvoy, but a guy like a guy like Patrice Bergeron, who is just a staple of class and dignity and a great person for the locker room, I don't think you easily replace that. I mean, we've seen that with Zetterberg, we've seen that with Datsyuk, we've seen that with Lidstrom and Yzerman. Like, you don't usually replace those guys that quick. There's usually a void of, what was he was around that organization for a long time. So that's why I think the Bruins are going to take a step back. I think the East is going to cannibalize itself. I really do. I think you could potentially see a Eastern Conference team in the playoff with 87 points, 86 points. I think that's what's going to be. I don't think there's going to be a team that runs away with the East. I mean, from top to bottom, from, you got the Montreal Canadiens, but besides that, you got the Buffalo Sabres, you got the Ottawa Senators, you got the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes. There's so many good teams in this Eastern Conference. I just think that they're just going to beat each other up. And then whoever is left standing with the least amount of injuries is gonna do well.
Well, that's the key, and you said it right there. And it's going to be a matter of who stays healthy. That's really what it's going to be, a huge, huge, huge factor, because you can have all the guys on the roster that you want, right? I mean, I think there's a certain football team that learned that you can go ahead and sign one of the best that's ever played the game, and if he gets hurt in the first game or two, doesn't do you much good to have him on the roster now, does it? So it's not a matter of who you sign, it's a matter of who you can keep healthy. And that's where the Red Wings, I think, really have to put their effort. I think they'll be able to do that. And the good news is that they do have, and Derek Lalonde said this, it's an easy call up for forwards, so that's why he doesn't have a problem going in with his 7-11 plan. If he needs to do that, he doesn't need the 13th forward. Those are easy call ups. So it's going to be critical that they stay healthy. It's certainly in the first part of the season.
Yeah.
I'm not so worried if we face an injury later in the season, but it's so hard to recover them, even gain momentum or recover when you have your injuries early in the season. So I'm really hoping, I think the real key for the Red Wings is staying healthy between now and the end of the year. If we see significant injuries, 2-3 key guys getting taken out between now and the end of December, it is going to be a very long season and a very tough road to hoe. So my wish for the Detroit Red Wings is that they stay healthy at least through the end of this year, get some solid footing, and get some momentum building, because that momentum can really carry you forward. And I think that the guys that we've got on the roster are very used to that. They will be able to feed off of that. So even later in the season, if you've got the momentum going, later in the season, you lose a guy here or you lose a guy there. Even if they're critical pieces or what seems to be critical pieces, you've got enough other ones to help make up for that. And you've already accumulated a considerable number of wins before that happens. So if I have to choose, a lot of people would say, I want to be hurt now, healthy later. I'll tell you this, I would rather be healthy now and get hurt later.
Well, we've seen it last year.
I want to get hurt at all, but
you don't have a choice on the matter.
Right.
Okay, but it's funny because a lot of people talk about you want to get hurt later in the season. I'm pretty sure if you tell Carolina right now that you want to get hurt later in the season, I'm pretty sure they're going to tell you, dude, go F yourself.
Right.
Like, literally go F yourself, because Andrei Shletnikov got hurt the later half of the season for the Carolina Hurricanes, and that magically changed the whole complexion of the Eastern Conference and the Metro Division, because when you have a guy like Shletnikov, who is one of the best goal scorers in this league, when he's on the lineup, it opens up a lot of areas where now other guys have to make up the production, and so, like, I would rather get hurt later in the season a little bit, but I don't want to get hurt at all. But if you're making me like, if I'm a playoff team, like if I'm the Rangers or I'm the Leafs or I'm I would want to get hurt more in the middle part of the season. I think that's what you're alluding to. Like, get hurt, like, you don't want to get hurt at all, but if you're gonna take injuries on like that January and February, maybe you get off to a good start, you kind of go back down, and then in March and April you kind of pick yourself back up. That's what the Red Wings used to do. I mean, like, they used to have those laws where they'd do great for the first half of the season, then January and February with the cold Michigan winters, they just fall right down, and then April, May, March and April, they're going back up.
Well, the other benefit too of getting, if you have to take an injury, taking it in January, is that that you've got the All-Star break coming up where you get a little bit of time to recover, right, before you come back. Yeah, so that's a little bit of an advantage if you have to choose the time to get injured. But that is, I think, what they're talking about in terms of the Red Wings having a good October. I think that's a huge component to that. I think what we're going to see with as far as our biggest problem child. I know, and I'm not a New Jersey. Yeah, I think everybody can say that. But who I think is our Achilles heel is Toronto. I think it's going to be Toronto. Toronto's going to be a problem for us because they're like that little sister you just can't get rid of. She just hangs around and hangs around and hangs around. She's always there. The Leafs are always seems to be in the top 5. They're I would say always a bridesmaid, never a bride. They never make it. They never win a championship. You know, there's a big joke about that, like who's going to win a championship first, the Lions or the Leafs? And I think now
Same
it's
team.
obvious it's going to be the Lions. But Toronto is always a tough customer.
Yeah.
You know, when you've got the forward stack the way that they do and the talent stack the way they do top, you know, granted there's only a few of them, but damn, they're tough. So they're going to cause that problem for you. And these are guys that have such established careers. They're kind of intimidating straight off the bat. Now, the good news with these veterans, whereas these guys like Austin Matthews and, you know, they might have intimidated our young guys. They don't intimidate these veterans. They played against them. They know what's what. They don't scare them. They came up together, started together, whatever. So I don't think it's going to have as much of an impact as it did maybe on our younger guys. But I still think Toronto, for some reason or another, tends to be a problem for us.
Yeah, you know, with Toronto, I just can't buy into their goaltending situation. I can't buy into their defensive situation. I think forward-wise, they're the scariest team in the NHL. But we all know that you do not win hockey games. Well, you do win hockey games with forwards. You do in the regular season. But once you get to the playoffs or you get to the later half of the year, you do not win games like that. You win games with goaltending and defense. And if your goaltending and defense stand up to this test of time, those will be the two most reliable things that can happen. Because during a year, during any NHL year, you know, you could talk to Darren about this, but during any NHL year, you're going to have guys that go through slumps, right? Defensively, you never really go through slumps. Or, you know, maybe your goaltender goes through a slump, but you have a second goaltender that can help you out. With the Leafs, they don't have that. They don't have that luxury. So they have to outscore opponents all the time. I mean, I was looking at their total goals tonight against the Montreal Canadiens.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 3.5, but you could realistically put it at 5. Like, if you put it 4.5 every night, I think everyone would take the over because that's what they have to score to win. Now, a team like Montreal, they don't have to score 5 goals to win. But like a team like Tampa Bay, Boston, Florida, I mean, those are teams that they're going to have to really pipe down and try to score more than their opponent on those nights because their defense is not going to hold up.
Well, you know, and I'm glad that we're playing New Jersey early, right? Because we'll help to us. Yeah, because we'll get a very good benchmark and a good establishment. It's kind of like, I was happy that the Lions played Kansas City first off, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you set a tone and you send a message when you beat, you know, kind of the reigning champs. And New Jersey is not that, but clearly far and away, everybody thinks they're going to be the toughest customer on the block right now for this season. So that being the case, if we show well against New Jersey, and if we beat New Jersey, that is going to help with confidence. That is going to help establish identity. And the one thing I really want to see from the Red Wings, I want to see them come out very, very physical. Yeah. Hopefully overly physical. Like, I want people to be afraid of us. When that grind line came out on the ice, people were afraid. When Bob Probert came out on the ice, people were afraid. Yeah. It changed their game. It shook them. And we want to shake these guys. The Wings need to make people shake in their skates. That's what has to happen, because that changes the whole dynamic, and that allows them to come in and dominate and to control the environment and control the narrative. And that's what I think we need to start the season out with. We need to let them know that we're tough customers too, and that people need to be afraid every time they come on the ice with us.
I think you have to look no further than Florida, because the way Florida got to the Stanley Cup Finals, they were physical, they were tough, they're gritty, and they just wore you down all 4 lines. And then you look at the Vegas Golden Knights. There's not one superstar in that Vegas Golden Knights roster. You could say Jack Eichel all you want. You could say Mark Stone all you want. But Mark Stone can't stay healthy. That's number one. And Jack Eichel, I mean, that was his best year, and I need to see a little bit more. But if you put Jack Eichel on the Red Wings, is he the same player? No.
No.
Because ultimately hockey is a team game. I think people all time people forget that hockey is a team game. Very rarely do you have a guy that takes you over the top. Now, Connor McDavid is a unicorn. The guy can literally do anything. He's McJesus. Now, McJesus still can't get the Oilers over the hump. He's one of the best players in the league, and when he goes to the playoffs, he goes to play the Vegas Golden Knights. They cripple him. They get him rattled. And why do they get him rattled? Because they're physical, they're gritty, they're tough to play against. And a player like that, when he's doing it all by himself, him and Draisaitl, it's not going to be a good situation. So you want depth like the Red Wings have right now. You want guys that could score on every line, which I could say on the Red Wings score lines right now. I could see a lot of goals on each line. And then ultimately, you need your defense to help you out on the power play, in the penalty kill. You need those moments, because if you don't get those moments, you're going to lose.
Yes. So what would you say? So we'll agree they need to be physical, and they need to come out, and they need to be definitive about it. I mean, there can't be any, well, we're going to get physical. No.
The reason that they lost the games that they lost last year were because they were the least physical team, and teams literally pile drive them into the ice. That's why they lost. Those 2 games against Ottawa showcased everything that was wrong with the Red Wings. They went at them physically. They tried to abuse them mentally. They knew that when they got the puck that they were going to get their heads taken off, and that really rattles you. Like if you're a played hockey, you watch hockey. If you have to think about a guy coming at you all the time, you're probably going to be less reluctant to skate up the ice, make some cool moves. Like you're just like, get this puck out of here. Like, here you go, dude.
Right. So it definitely shakes the game. It shakes their game, and that's what we need to do. So that needs to be established very early, and I really hope that Derek Lalonde takes that kind of posture. Certainly, by the look of the roster, they're setting that up. They've got Klim Kostin in there, and I can tell you from watching him, that guy's he's a jerk. I mean, but in a way, a good way, right? So, and he's not a North American player either, so he comes a little bit with a little bit of that rough exterior, and that's great. That's great. And he's down on that grind line, that fourth line where I think he'll be the most effective. So I'm really hoping that Derek Lalonde takes that approach, and that they have that posture going in, because that will establish their identity for the rest of the season.
All-time Hart asked, do you think that we will finally make the playoffs this year? Now, if we go back to what me and Cindy were saying later, these are Cindy's picks, team MVP. And if you're on the podcast, you can listen to it, as you can watch it on YouTube as well. But Cindy thinks that DeBrincat and Seider are going to be the team MVPs. The highest goal scorer, in her opinion, is going to be Larkin, which that's an interesting choice. But, Cindy's an interesting person. Most underrated player is Gostisbehere, who she likes. I like Gostisbehere too. I was going to pick it, and then I saw hers, and I changed my opinion. Best goalie, we obviously have Ville Husso. Her record is 40, 34, and 8, and her playoffs were yes. For me, it was team MVP was going to be Dylan Larkin. DeBrincat was going to be the highest goal scorer. Most underrated player was going to be JT Compher. The surprising player, who I think is going to be the most surprising player on the Red Wings this year, is going to be Alex Lyon, I think he's going to take that number 2 goalie spot by the Reign. I think he might push Husso. But the best goalie is going to be Husso, obviously, because I think he's only going to get better this year. And I think the record will be 1 game better than Cindy said, 41, 33, and 9. But I have an extra OT loss. I do think they make the playoffs, but I think it's going to be tough, because I think once you get into kind of like that fringe playoff territory, especially in the East, I think that if I'm a metropolitan team, I'm trying to get in the top 3 of the Metro. If I'm an Atlantic team, just get the wild card, because I feel like the Atlantic is going to be the tougher conference by far. So if you are in the Atlantic, like the wild card is going to be a realistic expectation. I mean, I think that you could really do that, because do I think the Washington Capitals are a good team? Not really. I mean, I think they can make the playoffs, but you look at the top 3 in the Metro, it's the Rangers, it's the Rangers, it's the Devils, and it's the Hurricanes. and then the rest are a drop off. I mean, you look at the New York Islanders, who they have one of the best goalies in the league in Sorokin, but they can't score at a high pace. So
Yep.
they're not really going to be a team that's going to outscore you every night. They're going to have to play defensive hockey every single night.
Well, I think one of the things that the Red Wings are going to bring to this season is the fact that they're, I think, much better balanced than they were last season. We're a much better balanced team. Not only in, I mean, they've made improvements everywhere. They made improvements in special teams. They've made improvements in their forward units. They've made improvements on defense. I think we have better defensive pairings, more reliable defensive pairings, more experienced defensive pairings this year. And I think that, you know, they've improved in net. So, I mean, everywhere where they needed to make improvements, they have made improvements. And that's why I think that we're going to see north of 90 points. Yeah, I mean, and what I found interesting, Joe, is that we both think they're going to win at least 40 games, which they haven't done in five or six seasons now.
I think this is a year they're going to win at 40 games. I think the East is going to cannibalize itself. I think if you're in the Atlantic Division, every night's going to be a pain in the ass. Like if you're Toronto, if you're Tampa, if you're Boston, if you're Florida, if you are the Buffalo Sabres, the Ottawa Senators, the Red Wings, every night you go out and play the Atlantic Division, you're going to be like, holy shit, can we just play someone else? When I play Arizona, can I play San Jose? Like, that's what you're going to be saying, because
everybody wants to play Arizona.
In that cute little arena, you know, it's so cute, just so cute. But yeah, if you're in the Atlantic Division, every night that you go out there, you're gonna be like, holy shit, dude! Like this is tough. This is tough. Like I know for a fact that, like, I was talking to a guy. He's a big time hockey handicapper. He's a big time bettor for hockey, and he does like the money lines and the puck lines and all that stuff, all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he said is, I'm gonna lose so much money on the Atlantic Division this year. It's not even gonna be funny. Because every given night, if you take the Buffalo Sabres, if you take the Toronto Maple Leafs to beat the Buffalo Sabres, who's to say the Sabres don't come out there and beat the crap out of the Leafs? I mean, that's just the way that this Atlantic Division works. Like he says, look at the Red Wings. They can go out and play Toronto they can go out and play Tampa Bay the second game of the season on their home opener and mollywhoop them. Or the Devils. Like they can come out and play the Devils and win that game too. He's like, the East is going to be a pain in the ass to bet on, but the West is going to be easier to bet on because you kind of can get a glimpse of the teams that are good and the teams that are really, really bad.
Well, you know, one thing that David Perron said is that he can't wait to get into the regular season, because as much as you try to figure out the dynamics and the chemistry and all that stuff during camp and preseason, it's just not the same as regular season when you've got things that are at stake. You know, you've got points that are at stake now. And so that changes things. And I think we're going to see, I think we've seen flashes of what the Red Wings can do. I mean, that 6-1 win over Chicago, we saw what they can do. And even in some of the, you know, the one of their losses, it wasn't like horrific. I haven't seen them play horrifically. You know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, that was a train wreck. I haven't seen a train wreck yet. I've seen kind of safe play. I've seen a little mediocre play, but man, when they came out and they let Chicago know who was boss. And that's why I think the posture that they take is absolutely critical in the first few games of the season. They have got to take that same kind of posture and just skate right over these guys. They just got to let them know nothing's going to stop them. And if somebody tries to stop them, that they've got some grinders out there that are going to make those people pay. So that's the posture that has to be taken. Now, the one concern I still have, I had it last time we talked. I saw it in training camp. I see it in preseason. I'm really hoping, but I'm going to reiterate, I don't see them playing. I see a lot of guys playing individually well with, you know, but I don't see the gelling yet. And maybe I'm just expecting it too soon. Yeah. But I just don't see them playing as comprehensive units yet. Once we get into maybe the regular season, maybe that's what David Perron is referring to. You know, you just got to get those things to really shake out. You got to get out there during the regular season. Yeah. But I want to see that sooner rather than later. The longer we go through the season where I'm not seeing that, where we're not really seeing that gelling happen, that's going to have me concerned. That's the one thing I'm really looking for. And then I'm looking for everybody to stay healthy. So If everyone stays healthy, we have more time to get that done. And then the posture. And I don't think there's a doubt. People said before we don't have the talent. You can't say that now.
Right.
You just can't. We've got the talent. There's really no excuse. Now we just need to get the dynamics right and maybe make, some tweaks and changes, of course, but we definitely have the capability to be playoff contenders, and I'm expecting this. It's kind of like when you have those teachers that start off with an A at the beginning of the year, and then you lose you go down from there. It's
I was known for that, but go on.
Of course you were not. I'm just teasing you, but right.
It's true.
So, yeah, so I think
Jenna thinks it's a joke too. Like she's in. If we have kids, when we have kids, she's in for it because they're gonna be like a version of me, like those parent teacher conferences. It's gonna be like me in the seat of my mom and dad. I'm gonna be like, holy shit, this is horrible. Oh my God.
I had a couple of those parent teacher conferences with my.
Well, Johnny boy over there, he's the same way. Like it's just the way it goes. Right. You either have that or you don't.
That's it. I don't know how many of them inherited the brains from me and brawn from their dad. I'm not quite sure how all that shook out, but I think the Red Wings are kind of in that position. I mean, they got an A right now. They have an A. They've got all of the components capable of making them show very, very well coming out. So now it's kind of like now they get to go down from there. So. And I hope that they don't. I mean, obviously they're going to fall some from that status, but they have the pieces that they need. Now they just have to get them in the right, let's say, the right combination. Not literally line combinations, probably. I think Derek Lalonde. I think you're going to see that, by the way. Speaking of line combinations, I think you're going to see Derek Lalonde certainly. Getting creative with some of his line combinations, but I love what he's already got going on. I really do. I think he's very, very close to getting exactly where he needs to be.
Well, I like what Lalonde said on the 97 to take today. He was talking about how, he has a lot of lineup combinations to play with. He has a lot of things that he has to kind of figure out with the line combinations, which ones work the best, which ones don't work the best, which ones help you out in a certain situation. I think that's what David Perron was alluding to. I also think that like David Perron is alluding to this. You don't know what you have until you get out there and live fire. Like you really don't know what you're dealing with. Like a guy like for instance, like there's a guy in Pittsburgh. He was their preseason darling, and he looked lost out there yesterday. So that's the things that can happen once you get in the regular season. I mean, like anything can happen. I mean, Connor Bedard. We were talking about Connor Bedard all off season about how people have these unrealistic expectations of him, but for the most part, he did pretty damn good in his first game. He was skating well. He was making plays, doing things the right way. But the one thing that he found out really, really quick was in the regular season, it's a little bit more amped up. Like you're the one play that you think that you can make, you're not going to be able to make. And he made that play earlier in the game, and then he realized can't do that. It's not junior hockey anymore. And I think that's what David Perron is alluding to. Like, I think every player goes through that when they're starting the season. They're like, okay, preseason, I got away with this play. Let me try it again. And then you realize, no, that was a preseason for a reason. This is the regular season. I got to kind of get it back up to snuff.
Right. Well, and too, in the preseason, you're not seeing all the A squads out there.
No.
You might see a couple of elements of it, but people are, the preseason is meant to do certain things, and they're not putting their A game out there.
No.
So once you get into like I said, you get into that regular season where now things count, and now they're putting out their best effort. It's a whole different scenario. I have my concerns about Connor Bedard, not for his talent, but I definitely have. But I've got concerns about the way the Chicago organization is going to use him. I have concerns about unrealistic expectations. I have concerns about him handling the pressure. I've got concerns for Connor Bedard as a person and as a player as well. And I'll be watching that. I mean, obviously he's not one of our guys, but I've got concerns about him.
He did pretty damn good last night against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it was it was a brilliant move by the NHL to start him against Sidney Crosby. Like, you guys scripted the hell out of that one. Like, yeah, we're gonna play Connor Bedard against Sidney Crosby. Like, that's gonna be a good one. But
Right.
they really, the Penguins, they kind of let that one go. They were up 2-0, and then they 4 unanswered goals, and next thing you know, I mean, 3 unanswered goals and in the empty net. Like, Connor Bedard did a pretty damn good job. I mean, the first period, you could see that he was a little bit rattled by the one play that he made, and then he got a little bit better as the game went on. But like David Perron was alluding to, like, that's exactly what it is. Like, there's just some things that you don't really get to fix in the preseason. I think that's the way it is in the NFL. It's the way it is in the NHL. I think the only one kind of preseason that you can really get something out of is spring training for baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, basketball certainly not, because none of the players play, but
Right.
but baseball, like, you really can't run around baseball. Like, that's the only spring training is pretty much the only one that you go, okay, this kid's gonna be good, this kid's not gonna be good, or this guy's gonna have a career year, or this guy's not gonna have a career year. In hockey, you can't do that. In NFL, you can't do that because we've seen it over and over again with the Detroit Lions. And I think what David Perron was alluding to is, look, it's a different element in the regular season.
Right. And so these next in the Red Wings schedule here in their first 5 games, they're being quite tested. We've got the New Jersey Devils. Look at that. Yep, there you go. New Jersey Devils, Tampa Bay, and Columbus. So it's kind of like 2 out of those 3 are definitely litmus tests for the Detroit Red Wings. And we'll be able to see, I think, a lot of insight there in those 3 games and see how the Red Wings handle that. Derek Lalonde is going to be, I think, also, it's going to be interesting to see who his choices are for netminders in each one of those games. Does he use Ville Husso in all 3? Does he change it up a little bit? How is he reacting by who he puts in net, depending on who he's playing? So that's something else that I think will be interesting to see as well. And let's face it, worst case scenario, if the NHL, they did the Connor Bedard, Sidney Crosby matchup, when in doubt, hook one of them up with a famous singer or actress and put her in the stands.
The Travis Kelce situation.
Yeah, pull Swifty. Pull Swifty on him.
I mean, I don't know if anyone in hockey is getting close to Taylor Swift, but we'll see.
I don't know if anybody there's a couple of them that could probably pull one of those beauties, but hey,
if Henrik Lundqvist was still playing, he could pull Taylor Swift. I mean, have you seen?
Could have anybody he wanted. Come on, he's my other favorite.
First of all, the guy is an impeccable dresser. That's number one.
Oh, fantastic.
Second of all, like, his hair and his grooming is. I now we're getting too close to this, but his hair is unbelievable. Like, to have flow like that is unbelievable, and not to mention he's a Hall of Fame goalie. Like, it wasn't like he was like some blood on the ice. He was one of the best goalies of all time. Like, Henrik Lundqvist can get. He could get the Taylor Swift treatment. I mean, that's one of the guys I think could get him.
Oh, no doubt. In fact, I posted a meme out on Facebook last year, and I was like, yeah, I'm really enjoying watching Henrik Lundqvist do his broadcasting, and isn't it obvious why? And every woman was like, absolutely. I mean, he's absolutely yummy. And
Paul Bichonette from Spittin' Chicklets.
Mm-hmm.
He said when we have Hank on the TNT broadcast, the viewership spikes like 50%.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. It's the same reason you have me on this podcast. Let's face it, Joe.
I know. I mean, it's certainly not for the technical angle because I sucked at that today. But
it's certainly not because you appreciate my hockey acumen, because you're usually telling me how I'm wrong all the time. And
I mean, if you look at our picks, they're not much different. Cindy has 40, 34, and 8. I have 41, 33, and 9. I mean,
you're rubbing off on me.
We're right there. I think it was. I think we're expecting the same thing. I think the one you were talking about how it can go off the rails for you, your concern.
Yeah.
I think my concern is, do the goaltenders like Reimer and Lyon, who I have expectations for Lyon, but can they really be good goaltenders to back up Ville Husso? Because Last year, the reason the Red Wings went in the tank is Houston ran out of freaking energy. He ran out of energy. He didn't have the same spunk at the end of the year, and that was because the goalies that were backing him up, like Hellberg and Nedeljkovic. I mean, you would constantly get my text messages saying, "I hate Hellberg. This guy sucks.
Yep.
Like this guy is ass." I was like, "Bring up Ned." We had podcasts saying, "Bring up Ned." Like we were that desperate for a secondary goaltender. And I think that's the biggest issue that you could have for a team because in this league, NHL, you need 2 goaltenders. I don't think there's a spot in the league anymore for a goalie that goes 70 games and then you have guys that starts 12. That's
Yeah.
not realistic anymore. And even Derek Lalonde said that, like, he's like, look, we think we have the goaltending situation figured out with the 3 goaltenders. Because they asked him about the 3 goaltenders on ice on the ticket, and
Yeah.
he basically said the same thing I said. Like, Husso ran out of energy last year, and we were counting on Hellberg and Nedeljkovic to be good goaltenders, and it just didn't happen. And that's part of the reason that you didn't make the playoffs, because if you just win 2 or 3 of those games, that could have propelled you into the playoffs. Like that's just how cool that's how this league works. Like 1 or 2 wins could propel you into the playoff discussion. And we see how close they were to the playoff discussion, but ultimately the goaltending situation really reared its ugly head, and that's one of my concerns this year is can we get better goaltending than we did last year? Because that was absolutely awful.
Well, we certainly have more options and we have more depth. I think the Red Wings have more depth this year than they have had in probably the previous 5 seasons. And so that bodes well for us. Now, the question is, can we get back to a point where we have someone who is reliable as Pavel Datsyuk? Can we have someone it's dynamic, as Zetterberg or whatever? Can we get 2 of those guys at the same time, And I do think that we have, certainly with our new acquisitions, some of those guys who have definitely the possibility of that. I think Alex DeBrincat is going to bring some consistency. That's one thing, that C word has been a problem for the Red Wings all for the last several
What's
seasons.
the word?
Consistency.
Oh.
Consistency.
I'll get my mind out of the gutter. Okay.
Get your mind out of get your mind out of the, you know what? They all need a little more C. They all need a little more Cindy in their life.
No.
Which is
one's good enough.
God. Which is why they need to start watching again, because quite a few of them watch this podcast. So right. And they did say they're very happy that we're back. So looking forward to getting Detroit Red Wings news, all that stuff back, and they can find it on the Red Alert podcast.
Still talking to the Facebook people. I mean, they can't put their mind together. Now, if you are a Facebook person and you're from Meta, give us our effing page back, because listen, we weren't doing anything wrong. We were giving good content out, and I know there was some hoe bag that reported us that just she is very, very disliked among the Red Wing fans. So don't take her opinion as gospel.
She's disliked among the Red Wings, period. The Red Wings community altogether, and she's a hater. Don't support the haters. Meta.
Who likes
us back our page?
Who likes her? Like, that's a question. Who
Nobody.
likes her? So, anyways,
anyway,
this has been a good podcast. We're gonna have more podcasts. We're gonna have podcasts next Tuesday. We're gonna go over the look ahead. Again, they have the Devils. Obviously, they play at the Devils tomorrow. So the season starts tomorrow. You could listen to this before the game. They play Saturday at home. That's a home opener. A home opener on a Saturday. How about that? And then they play Columbus on Monday, which Columbus is not expected to be a really good team. So I think the Red Wings can get a kind of a good jump there. If they win one of these 2 games and then they win Columbus, that's a good start to the year. So
you bet.
Do you got any closing thoughts, Cindy?
I can't think of any offhand. I'm pretty much, you probably exhausted my brain capacity for the day.
Well, see, you guys don't understand that Cindy has been working her tail off. Finally she decides to put in the work, and so there's people,
you sassy man.
There is people that you work with that say you don't work that much. So You know.
Well, we'll just have to see, it's a little bit, got a lot going on here in the day job, right? And then we're doing the podcast, and, a lot of people know I'm writing a book and working on movies now. And,
Yeah.
I don't sleep really.
You don't sleep, and
No.
now you're with the movie stars, so you're just gonna be getting Botox pretty soon. So
well, let me I don't know about that, but let me tell you, those guys are absolutely crazy. They film until 3-4 in the morning. It was every single day, 12 to 14-hour days. Start at 3 in the afternoon, you get done filming at 4 in the morning, and then they do it all over again for 2 weeks straight. I mean, they are warriors, man.
When you said that you were doing some, now your husband Jeff was doing a scene for this movie. He was a double or whatever, and
extra.
Extra.
And my son's in the movie too.
Oh yeah, John's in the movie too. Yeah. So so like they were in the movie, and you texted me at like 11 o'clock, and you're like, yeah, they're going on now. I'm like, oh. 11 o'clock at night. Like, what are we doing? Like, do these people have like what are we filming? Halloween or Michael Myers, or what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, at least they were heavily clothed, because there were a couple people on set that were quite lightly clothed, and I felt bad for them because they were freezing to death. So,
welcome to Michigan.
Welcome to Michigan, but they love filming here, and so we're excited. Anyway,
it's just a damn shame that these people that are politicians like you, they just wanted to ruin the movie industry. So hopefully we get hopefully we get this puppy back, so we can get some red alert time on some of these movies.
Absolutely, and we're gonna be bringing maybe some of my new celebrity friends onto the podcast. How about that?
Well, we will have some fun this year, and if you're new to the podcast, subscribe and rate and review. And if you're on the YouTube channel, which I know there are some people still on the YouTube channel, like, comment. I know some of you weren't commenting. I'm kind of ashamed by you. So we talk hockey, and you guys don't want to talk hockey. So I can't help you.
Yeah, you got an opinion. We know what it is. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me that you don't even know why she has that Cindy person on there. Get rid of her. Get on get on another guy.
No, but we can't replace you. You're going to Hollywood stardom, so we have to kind of ride the wave with you. Just
that's right. Come on, join the team. But that's another reason why you gotta like, subscribe, follow us, because we got a ton of exciting stuff going on. If you haven't seen, or heard the interview with Dr. Murray Howe, Gordie Howe's son, he tells some stories that I promise, and perspectives that you haven't heard anywhere else, about what it was like to grow up with Mr. Hockey and what Gordie Howe would think of the game today.
So if you are on the podcast, you can go back and listen to that. That's a good podcast. I listened to it, and there was a lot of things in there, Cindy, that I was like, wow, I did not know that, but that is good to know. And it was a good interview that you had with Dr. Murray Howe. And it's interesting because his dad broke bones on the ice, and he fixes broken bones. It's like the polar opposite.
It comes all full circle at the end of the day, Joe.
It really does. So that means, that means one of your kids is going to go in something different than politics. So, yeah.
Oh, good. All right, Joe. Well, I am excited to talk to you about the Red Wings after we see them take on New Jersey, and certainly Tampa Bay, and hopefully they run right over Columbus.
You have to subscribe to the Red Alert page. We have to build that up, and if we do get our page back, it will be merged into this the page we had. So just like it, follow it, and we'll get it up to stuff, and then maybe we get up to like 5,000 followers, and we're good to gold. So it'll be all right. So we will see you guys in the next podcast as we talk more Red Wings hockey. They'll be next Tuesday as you look ahead to the Red Wings versus which they'll play the Penguins on next Wednesday. So hopefully we're talking about some wins, Cindy. Hopefully we're talking about good stuff, because I was sick of talking about bad stuff last year. And we will see you guys in the next podcast as we talk more Red Wings hockey. See you guys soon.
See you then.